Welcome, everyone. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Dan Prager. Dan is a mathematician turned computer programmer turned agile coach. He's been doing fantastic work for many years in the agile community across many organizations, large, small, different countries, mostly in Australia and Asia region. Um, Dan has been training in Agile, coaching in Agile, and contributing to the community quite significantly. And his latest contribution, one of his latest contributions, the Pragers Law, is going to be the main topic of our discussion today. Hi, Dan, and welcome.
Hi, Arash. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. So, to start, I'm going to ask you a question, which probably a lot of people can relate to. What's Agile Hell?
Thanks. So Agile Hell is my description of what can go wrong when Agile is introduced naively. The thumbnail sketch goes something like this. I reckon you can start with, at the team level, let's say with Scrum or Kanban, two of the more popular team level approaches, both good in particular contexts, and get an immediate uplift, maybe 20 to 30% of productivity, however you choose to measure it, just by visualizing your work, working a bit more in teams, a bit of reflection, maybe a bit of slight limiting of work in process. And Agile Hell is then what happens when you make the wrong move. And the wrong move right then is to say, great, we've got 20% more productivity. Let's just throw 20% more work at the team. And what you find is that that just sort of will demotivate the team, and they'll just sort of slowly but surely start to burn out. So your initial gain of 20 to 30% will erode over time, and you'll be left with a burnt out, demotivated team that hates Agile. That's Agile Hell.
Well, I think a lot of people might have experienced Agile Hell. And, you talk about the concept of, well, when we had waterfall projects, we had this ramp up and ramp down period, which could, help people relax a bit in between those batches of work, right? Versus in Agile, it's like, go, 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 go.
Spot on. So that gets squeezed out, can get so easily squeezed out in this situation. Sometime colleague of mine called this, at the higher level, Agile Tetris, where you start trying to stick the pieces of work together so that you squeeze out the ramp up and ramp down, and that just makes things worse because we're not machines. And I don't think that was the intention of Agile, but unfortunately we're seeing a bit of it at the moment. So please don't do that.
Absolutely. And it's very real, like for people, for developers who are doing the work, if that happens to them, they can feel the stress. And, I would say that could be one of the reasons of resistance in certain areas to Agile adoption. Now, before moving into the Pragers Law, one of the other key concepts there is theory of constraints, and how systems thinking and having that bigger picture comes into play. I remember years ago, I think it was 2 years ago or something, in Canberra, we were discussing after your talk, and I couldn't attend your talk because I was doing the same at the same time as yours in a conference. And when you told me about the idea of the Pragers Law and theory of constraint, it was such an eye-opener, and I got so much excited about it. I don't know if you can remember that day we were walking towards the pub, right? So tell me about it. What's the theory of constraint, and how did it fall into this picture?
Yeah, it's a great question. So theory of constraints is a theory about how you optimize systems. And you can talk about it in a few different ways. I think perhaps what I would like to do is use a slightly non-traditional analogy, which I think people will relate to in the team context, and we'll get to the scaling in a couple of minutes, I expect. But most people can relate to the idea of being in a small boat and rowing it, maybe a canoe, where let's say it's you and me, Arash, and you're paddling on the left and I'm paddling on the right, like so. And we're going in a straight line, and we're going at whatever speed. Maybe we're going at I don't know what a good speed in a canoe is. But I haven't done it since I was a teenager. But maybe maybe we're not very good. Maybe we're going at 5 kilometers an hour, and then suddenly you something clicks for you, and your technique improves. So or you get a burst of energy, and you can go faster. But I'm not very good, and I haven't changed, and so you just start paddling faster. What does that help us go towards our goal? No. Why is that?
Yeah, it's gonna make us go in circles, right?
Make us go in circles because it's a team sport. We need to coordinate. We need to be in rhythm. It doesn't help us at all. So by naively just working harder, you haven't helped us in our larger scale objective. And I think there's a lot of things like that. Another analogy I use is if we were playing together in a jazz band, say you're playing the trumpet, suddenly you realize you can play much faster, but no one else can. Does the music improve? No.
Yeah,
it's the weakest link kind of thing. And in the theory of constraints in manufacturing, we talk about a pipeline or value stream of work, and you want to know where the weakest link is, because if you can improve that, then the pinch point opens for the whole thing.
And if you improve the wrong link, you could potentially create queues and create new bottlenecks in the system, right?
Exactly. So the theory of constraints teaches us to look for, where the weakest part is and help with that, and also to understand the bigger system. And so ideally, if we can see the whole system, and it's easy in our Canoe. So my question to you, and this will get us to Prager's law intuitively, the immodestly named Prager's law, is, well, if it seems good that you've learned how to paddle faster or you've found the energy, but it's not going to help. So what could you do instead, which would help? What are some options? What do you?
Well, I know the answers, but my favorite option is go to the beach, right?
We're already in the water, yeah.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, you're right. We're in the water. So all right. So not paddle faster. That's the first step. What I could be doing is I could do a paddle and then, relax a little bit in between and just save some energy. I could help maybe you improve your paddling technique, or maybe I could, just try to build a motor for the canoe, in my slack time, so we can put the motor in so that none of us have to paddle anymore. Things like
all kinds of creative suggestions. So already you've got an improvement. Let's say it's efficiency rather than energy. You could just do 3 strokes out of every 4. And, we won't be getting to the goal at the beach any faster, but you'll be feeling refreshed and better. You could help me. You could maybe coach me, give me some tips. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe you can help me more directly by paddling on my side of the canoe. So occasionally you do that, and that takes some of the pressure off me. But you don't just mindlessly try and work harder.
Exactly. Now, bringing this metaphor to the context of agile and delivery. So when a team improves or finds a way to improve and they can go faster, the idea is we don't want to deliver. Probably delivering more and delivering faster is not going to result in an optimum system level solution, because an optimum team delivery, optimizing on a team level, on a component level, may not necessarily optimize the whole, and it will probably result in a suboptimal whole, right? So what's your solution to that?
Right. So that's it. So, and especially personally, this came to me out of a bit of a crisis. I'd go into these big organizations, and by big, I mean so big I couldn't see the whole value stream or the whole system. I'd be called into one particular team or department or group, and there'd be pain there. But I was haunted by what we'd learned from the theory of constraints, that perhaps I was making things worse by helping in one area. Or even if this was the worst part, or the most problematic part of the value stream or the company, and I was improving, other people, maybe you, Arash, had been called into somewhere else, and we couldn't all be at the same, statistically, we couldn't all be at the
Yeah.
bottleneck. And
and the bottleneck may even be a symptom, right? The root cause may be somewhere else as well, right?
And, you know, and I've talked to people, you know, empirically, this is the danger, one of the dangers of scaling the way it seems to work in Agile, where I think it's a good thing to encourage these local improvements, but the theory of constraints haunts us. So the problem is this: you and I can be in different parts of the same organization making improvements and not speeding up. But of course, at a top level, we do want that global improvement. Mm-hmm. So you may see this where you have teams making local improvements, but as the theory of constraints predicts, it's not adding up. And I ran into one executive who said, we saw them improving locally, but our macro measures weren't improving until we told the teams that were doing really well locally and had, like you in the Canoe, had a bit of spare capacity, had opened up a bit of slack to go help the teams that were struggling. Right. So now we're bringing in that collaborative thing. Absolutely. So I was sort of doing this intuitively before Prager's law, but every time I thought hard about it, I felt that there was this conflict between theory of constraints and Agile. That in theory of constraints, the problem was no one had this view, this God's eye view in the organization of where to put all the improvement. And even if they did, it would be unethical, immoral to say to everyone else, don't do any improvement locally in your place, because it might be years before they became the bottleneck. So that didn't work. But what seems to typically happen in Agile is everyone's told to improve, and then somehow by a scrum of scrums or some kind of collaboration, it's all supposed to bubble up, which kind of sounds right. And I know SAFe talks about value streams, but I don't know that they've really mapped the value stream so much as relabeled. I think Lean kind of has it right. One solution is to try, like, think of a Toyota factory where you can see the whole value stream. It could be large, but if you can see everything, then that helps. But yeah, my solution comes back to the boat. So like little thought experiment, which solved it for me, is say you've got a team, say your team, Arash, it's really, really stable in its productivity. Your group does 5 days work in 5 days, week in, week out. And then 1 week, they commit an act of improvement and suddenly they can do the 5 days in 4 days. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they do, the Monday to Thursday they do, and they resist the temptation because they've heard Prager's law, which says the last thing you should do after you make an improvement is more work. Doesn't mean you should never do it. That's Prager's law.
The last thing you want to do after an improvement is take on more work.
Yeah, and so the choices I give are, well, look, one, a great idea is to celebrate. Mm-hmm. Secondly, reinvest some of that, more learning, more improvement, make it even easier. A third thing would be to help others locally, or if you are, you're holding everyone up, that's the last thing, is then you can speed up a bit because you're holding everyone back. Then it makes sense, even within a bigger patch. Mm-hmm. Possibly even worse than doing more work is to start laying people off.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right?
That's a no-brainer. But you see it all the time.
But you see, it's a no-brainer, but you see it all the time. That, of course, has a chilling effect of, will we get any more suggestions for improvement? Will we, so there's huge, I know you're interested in the emotional and ethical sides of things. So what's that about, Yeah. So the thought experiment though was on the Friday, everyone goes to the beach. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, does this theory of constraints says that if you make a local optimization, which we've got better, does this make things worse by increasing buffers and queues from a global perspective, just looking at throughput for the moment? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer is obviously no, unless other people find out and have the issue. But for the thought experiment, let's just call it a secret. Mm-hmm. And everyone could be doing this. They could be locally optimizing. Now, we haven't seen an improvement in throughput, but we haven't made it worse. Mm-hmm. But locally, morale has improved.
Absolutely.
And so we now have this discretionary slack, which we've opened up, this where you could do exactly the same things as in the Canoe, help others, I think so important to look around at the slightly bigger system. Where's, if not the global bottleneck, which are the neighboring teams
That
that
you.
are hurting, right?
Mhm.
Do the sense making. Maybe some of your techniques can be that have helped you will help other teams.
Mhm.
So instead of looking at, traditionally, it comes back to my maths background, we look at optimization as what's the highest level thing, and then if we've got multiple things we want to simultaneously optimize, let's build them into one
Yep.
mega function which balances different priorities. But here what we're finding is it's much more humane. We need to pace ourselves, open up this slack, do the system thinking, and then we can start to percolate extra capacity which we're opening up first to the local patch of the system,
And then
and
move
then
broadly.
further and further. And conversely, we need to be sending down help either in know-how or extra capacity to bottlenecks in larger and larger patches. So we don't need the God's eye view to
Yeah.
globally optimize, and you can start anywhere. Otherwise you're saying, look, only God can optimize, or the CEO, but it's too complex for even the
But
CEO.
even the CEO is part of a bigger system, right?
We're
So
all part.
we have to optimize at the end of the day. So if I were to summarize this, basically, there is two aspects to it. There is first the economic aspect of it, where uh, well, the Pragers law is basically an economic principle. Going back to the theory of constraint, I mean, even if we are dealing with machines, even if there are no people involved, if you optimize a certain area of a system, if you find more efficient ways of doing work in a certain component of the system, increasing the throughput of that component will probably have negative impacts on the broader system versus using that extra capacity for improving other areas of the system, or basically expanding that capacity would probably result in a global, more optimal global solution and higher global throughput. And then the second aspect is that people, emotional and social aspects of it, where, as people, creativity, when people are under delivery pressure, creativity isn't going to happen. And people need some slack, they need that thinking capacity, they need that time to stay back and strategize and just do nothing and just think, if we want to have an organization which is going to be exceptional and beat their competition in today's highly competitive work. Working harder is not the solution, working smarter is.
That's very nicely summarized. I think, and I think you can take it. Back a level as well. But I guess I have a passion for the reflection and improvement part of the picture, and we can even descale the argument to say, if we're going to get better at a team, can I improve as an individual? And
Yeah.
as an individual, do I take on more work, or do I help people in my team, where hopefully within my team I have a clear view of our local part of the value stream? And this is where the collaboration and collective work needs to improve. Again, coming back to the idea of
Mm.
the canoe. And so I think that it's really valuable to get very good at the application of this kind of thinking just down at the team level. You can start with Scrum. One of the key parts of Scrum was to try and finish sprints early,
Yep.
to open up a bit of slack time. There are other ways that you can manage it.
Exactly.
And with Kanban, the hard part, so that's the hard part of Scrum, was to not, we found in practice, is for people not to pull more, but to
Exactly.
use a bit of slack time and go,
Continuous
not
learning.
the ritual of the retrospective, but let's figure out, what are we actually targeting for improvement. Similarly with Kanban done well, getting that buy-in and that understanding around work in process limits, which will open up a bit of slack, the reverse of what you were doing at the start. And then the challenge for the coming generation of scale practitioners and senior managers and executives is applying similar systems thinking, different techniques, but similar thinking around seeing the system and making these improvements and working in a collaborative way, rather than just saying, everyone just work harder and
Yeah.
assuming that we're all rowing in perfect synchrony.
Absolutely, Dan. Okay, I think we're out of time. It was an absolute pleasure having you here today, and I always enjoy this conversation. Thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you, Arash.
And have a great day, everyone.